as we did last night, I think the initial question is what it is that you think you offer as a candidate over and above what your opponent has to offer, right? And does that sound familiar? All right, so without any further ado.
I'm Vance Patterson, your neighbor down in Burke County. I'm a father of 4, married 37 years to my wife, Mary Jo. And I always say that because it makes me feel good. Thank you for holding this event tonight to give Mark and I an opportunity to get before you and explain some of our differences. You see, this campaign at one time had 11 people in it. And with that muddle, you sometimes get confused as to how we stand on each issue. Everybody knew there was going to be a runoff, and everybody was right. We have a runoff. What's interesting is the 2 remaining candidates are both businessmen, which tells me that the people of Western North Carolina believe that our issues, our problems, are best answered by applying business principles. What you all need to decide now is which one of us is the best businessman. I tell people I'm an American businessman because I use American ingenuity, the American free enterprise system, and American work ethic to start companies and create jobs. I've started 16 companies. 2 of those companies made the Inc. 500 list for the 500 fastest growing companies in America, and twice I've been Entrepreneur of the Year finalist here in our Southeast region. Currently, I own and operate a company that makes industrial fans. I am a manufacturer. My campaign from the beginning has been about jobs and prosperity and the fact that we don't have to wait here in the 11th District for the rest of the country to turn around, that we can turn our own economy around and show how it's done. I am Tea Party. I am the small business owner who for 38 years couldn't wait to get to work and then couldn't wait to get home. And there just wasn't much in between until Obama got elected. And that's when I knew I had to step up with my experience, my common sense, and my passion to try to turn America around and save it for our future generations. And this is where Mark and I will not be the same person. Using these Tea Party principles, the 9/12 group principles, and the Freedom Works principles to reform government. I am, and have been from the beginning, the only candidate in favor of term limits and will help initiate putting all of Congress on the 22nd Amendment, where the president is limited to 2 4-year terms. I am the only candidate who from the beginning has said I will not vote to allow the debt limit to increase. I will vote no. And if that causes a crisis, well, let it be now. I am the only candidate who from the beginning on immigration has been against amnesty. If they don't go home, it is amnesty. I am the only candidate who from the beginning has said Homeland Security, those responsibilities shall go back to the Department of Defense and the Department of Justice. And the 216,000 private contractors get out of our lives. I am the candidate that will answer you with a yes or a no. I am Vance Patterson. I am Tea Party. And I look forward to your challenging questions. Thank you.
Well, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. Our campaign started some 9 months ago with a clear, consistent, conservative message that hasn't changed. And as we've done that, you will see that there are many times that we have similarities between Vance and I. But our jobs program is one where we see a very distinct difference between the 2 of us and how we approach problems. With our 4-point jobs plan, I look at reducing regulations, cutting taxes, taking earnings that are abroad and bringing them back here to be invested in American jobs, and coming up with a sound energy policy that, according to independent resources, will create more than 10 million jobs. And when we look at that, how does it do that? By getting government off the backs of businesses, by getting government out of the way and allowing the free market to survive. Now, Vance has a plan that he looks at government as being part of the solution, not the root cause of the problem. You know, he says that we have a macro plan and that he has a micro plan. But as we look at that throughout history, any time that the government got involved in terms of from a micro point of view, the result was a disaster. Even in 2010, Vance, as part of his campaign then, said that what we need from a government is only to be involved in economics from a macro level. But yet his plan comes up from a micro point of view. And so what we would be led to believe is that the root cause, the biggest problem for job impediment, is not taxes, regulations, and out of control spending. Or we would also be led to believe that businesses make a decision on where they're going to put companies based on the beauty that is out there, not on economic reasons. Both of those are not true. And so if we look at this, the other part with his plan is a funding problem. Is currently there is an earmark ban, of which both of us have pledged to uphold. But yet what we see is, in order to fund his plan, we would have to go against that. Finally, the NAFTA, when he looks at wanting to change the terms of NAFTA, while it's a noble and worthwhile cause, it is against the Constitution, because the Constitution reserves that right solely for the advice and consent of the Senate. And so in this particular time, as we look at changing NAFTA, we would have to have the Senate and the executive branch start that. Also, we would need to look at it from a standpoint of Mexico and Canada approving that. Now, my jobs plan looks at cutting taxes, regulations, and making it less government. But yet what we also see is that Vance says that that's not enough, that the private sector needs help. And so what he would say is that we would create a federally funded program to do that. What we have to look at is, Winston Churchill said, however good the strategy is, we occasionally need to look at the results.
Thank you. Let's look. Can you hear me? Am I doing that? Okay. Let's look back at what happened last week in Wisconsin. The conventional assessment is that the Republican Party strategy was responsible for Governor Walker's victory. What say you?
The Republican Party strategy?
The assessment is that the Republican Party strategy was responsible.
I think it's a prime example of two things. One is conservative principles and saying no to the unions and big government. It's finally standing up for your principles and taking a risk and allowing the grassroots to truly take part. Because here's what we see is, the Tea Party Express was through here on Saturday, and if you went inside that bus, there was line after line after line of computers. And they said they made unbelievable calls. They went up there to Wisconsin making calls. I know that we had volunteers from the western part of North Carolina going up there to lobby on behalf of making sure that they get out the vote. Anytime that you get out the vote for a conservative cause, the cause normally wins unless you're in the middle of Buncombe County. But in doing that, what we see is that over and over again, those conservative causes, the grassroots organization is really what it's all about. And it made the difference. How do we know that? Because we see union members that actually voted for Scott Walker when the majority of their union was saying that they shouldn't. And so that only comes when neighbors, friends, church members will pick up the phone and call. You're more influenced by the people that you know than quite frankly, any big agenda or any great, grand strategy. So I wouldn't say that it was a strategy. It was more a result of grassroots efforts in the conservative message.
Who said that?
The assessment, the conventional assessment is that the Republican Party strategy was responsible.
Yeah, and I disagree with that. I think it was a Tea Party effort. Again, as Mark said, grassroots effort. Tea Party's the one that stepped up and supported it, got the vote out. Yes, there was a lot of money flowing in from other states to spread the message and everything. But just spending money alone does not get the message out. It is the grassroots effort. And, there were Freedom Works up there was Tea Party, 912 groups. It was a consensus. And for somebody to say that just the Republican Party did it, I think that is totally wrong. It is not only the Republican Party that is against these oppressive labor unions. There are a lot of independents out there, and I'm sure they wouldn't want to be classified as Republicans. They're independent for a reason. I don't know what the percentage of the vote up there was, but for somebody to claim that this is a Republican-led uprising against the unions that's just wrong. That's not the way it happens in the real world.
Okay. In the aftermath of the Wisconsin election, radio talk show host and constitutional attorney Mark Levin pointed out that the House can select a new speaker who is not now serving in the body. What do you think of Levin's idea to consider Governor Scott Walker for Speaker? Or do you have someone you would consider for Speaker of the House?
I didn't hear Mark's remarks on this, Mark Levin. I'll hear Mark's remarks in a minute, I guess. To not have a sitting congressman be Speaker of the House, and he says that's constitutionally legal? Well, that's rather creative. The House, knowing that, will probably take steps to fix that. Yeah, I think leadership like the governor would be outstanding in Washington. He knows how to lead, he knows how to stand up. I don't think it'll happen. I don't think he has an intention of leaving Wisconsin and going to Washington. I don't know why he would. One of the first things we're going to do when we get to Washington, if elected, is select our leadership. And, John Boehner is a nice guy. I've heard that from a number of people, but he is not the strong leadership that we need in Washington now. That is one of the things that Washington is very deficit on, is strong leadership, both the Democrats and the Republicans. If both parties had strong leaders, this country would move forward, but we don't have it. Who would I select? Paul Ryan. I definitely like his ideas, his leadership. He doesn't mind stepping up there and saying what needs to be said, and he's got the right ideas. So I look forward to being up there and selecting that leader.
Interesting concept. He's been elected to a 4-year term, and so as we see that, obviously you want men of that kind of character and leadership. One of the things that has been exciting to watch this unfold is, and I got a text, I guess the night of, that said it's too close to call. And so I was really concerned because the polling originally showed that it was about a 3-point spread, then it was too close to call, and so I was getting real concerned that here's a guy that has stood up for the right principles, and he's about to go down. And what that would do is actually put more power in terms of the opposition. It would embolden the unions. It would have, really, truly empowered them. And what I've found is the opposite has happened. Is now we're energized. When Scott Walker won, not by 3 points, but by 9 percentage points, it was an overwhelming mandate that doing the right thing is the right. Would I vote for him? I don't. I would vote for his principles. Probably not for him. One guy out of 435, or even the majority, would probably not say that. I wouldn't vote for Boehner. I think really at this point that his leadership has been questioned, especially with the debt ceiling, and just how we've orchestrated that. And so I think that we've got to rein that in. Eric Cantor is one that's been really a conservative voice up there. There's been some votes recently that have been, concerning to me with him. And so as we look at that, as we come back to that, there's a great group of freshmen. One of the people that have endorsed us is a guy by the name of Jeff Duncan. And I asked him, I said, well, what is it going to take to really make a difference in Congress? And he says, well, it really is going to take about 25 more committed freshmen that are committed to conservative principles that can change the rules, the way that we do it. And you know what? That's doable, guys. And we can reclaim our country, and so in doing that, so somebody like Jeff Duncan would be, would it happen realistically? Not, as you look at that. And so at this point, it would be getting behind the most conservative alternative to John Boehner.
This next question is kind of a follow-on to something that was discussed last night, and that is, tell us again your experience working in a partnership with government at any level?
I've never been in a partnership with government. I said at one time that I think that I never got a government check. I did get a tax refund. I thought that was my own money, and so and then the only other government check, I actually got paid to be a poll worker, and so I forgot about that. I think it was all of about $32 for the day. I did get a meal, but that's the extent of my government involvement in terms of any checks or anything. And that's not to say anything. We've got men and women who have served our country greatly, and that's an honor, and they are part of that, and we need to make sure that we stand by them. And so in doing that, there are wonderful people that serve our country, and we need to make sure that we don't, in this scooping up and saying government is bad, is saying everything. We defend our country well, and we have consistently done that since the founding of our country. But yet at the same time, I don't have any government partnerships or rebates or stimulus checks that I've ever gotten or cashed.
I guess the first time I worked with the government was when we took out an SBA loan to finance our business. The bank required it. This is not something you want to do. When you borrow money from a bank, and if you can't pay that back, they can take just about anything but your house. The government will take your house. When we pushed everything out on the table, my wife got very nervous, and we did that SBA loan because the bank required us. See, the SBA doesn't have any money. They always go through the bank to do it. So that was my first experience. In my business, we manufacture industrial fans. They're man cooler fans. They're known for throwing a long distance. And we have sold fans to the government for our troops over in Iraq, and sent them over there and had very good report that they were very good and worked the way they should. We do have a GSA contract where we can sell to the government. We probably sell maybe 3%, 4% a year total to the government. So we do have experience with it. Certainly not relying on the government for anything. No rebates, no tax exemptions, nothing like that. So, we're pretty much at a distance. But I am experienced in working with the government and working with overseas shipments and that kind of thing.
Okay. How do you envision collaboration with the NC-11 and the grassroots during and after the general election?
Well, it's basically called Constituent Services, and typically we're allowed 18 staff members for a congressman, and typically you have 12 in Washington and 6 in the field. I see no reason or any way that I could work with 12 in Washington. Our intention is to flip that, have 12 in the field and 6 in Washington. In business, you have a maximum of 7 people that can report to you and still be efficient. So working with 6 in Washington, that will be fine with me. Putting 12 in the field will have a tremendous constituent services. And not just answering problems and taking care of issues and things. This is part of my jobs plan, to make sure we have a finger on what's going on in the field. We've got 17 counties in this district, and to handle all that with just 6 in the field is not feasible. And that's what's been done in the past, and that's why you don't feel like you've gotten the services out of your congressman that you should have in the past. I intend to be here in the district more than I'm in Washington. We only work 3 days a week up there. I mean, that's the only time Congress is in, plus all the vacations. They're going on vacation now. And where are they going? I'll bet they're not going back to their district. This is where I want to be. This is where I want to live. This is where I want to be and come home to. And this is where I want to work back here. There is so much to be done here in the district, and one of the big problems in the past is congressmen go up there and they start living in that bubble and you never see them again. And all you do is call the office and you get a hold of somebody that works for them out here in the field. That will not happen with my service to this district.
As we look at, I see it in three different areas. One is constituent services. We haven't had good constituent services since the days of Charles Taylor back here, where we actually had people that worked cases on a regular basis. Many of you knew that. Whether you were a Democrat, unaffiliated, or Republican, you got unbelievable service, and that's what we need to get back to. So that's one. But more importantly than that is a commitment that we've made on a couple of other areas, and one has to do with town hall meetings. You know, Congressman Schuler has had 0 town hall meetings in 5.5 years. And so as we look at that, how do you know what the people are saying other than, you know, a letter here or a letter there if you're not willing to go? And sometimes you don't want to face the music. You know, it's not fun to face the music, but we're committed to doing that on a quarterly basis. You know, some people have suggested once a month. I think that becomes a whole lot tougher to do with the schedule. I started looking at the schedule. In fact, Jane may have been the one that asked that particular question, but we're committed to do it once a quarter and where we have town hall meetings. In addition to that, we are already putting together, in terms of staying in touch with grassroots, which was specifically the question, is to have 85 people from across this district, 5 people per county, that literally become your eyes and ears for that county. And so with those 85 people, what they will do is we will do a monthly conference call where we're talking about legislation that's been passed, pending legislation, problems, ask for advice, and have that connection. We've started to do that, and these are not just people of like mind. These are people that you get that will get in your face, hopefully nicely, but get in your face and say, you know, here's where we are. This is what really represents the district best. Because the thing that we have, I don't know how many of you have ever had real contact with a congressman once they get there. You know, what happens is they get there and you don't get to meet with them. So that 85, not to say that they would represent everybody, but it keeps you connected with those groups. And I think that those 3 things will make sure that we stay well-grounded, accountable, and on the right track.
Thank you. Through your association with Independence Caucus, you've both indicated a commitment to constitutionally limited government. What are your legislative priorities in this regard?
You know, I look at it as really where we have to do is start to roll back the regulation and make sure that everything that is passed passes constitutional muster. We've got Dr. Ferris has agreed to look at any pending legislation for us. He's a constitutional attorney, an international attorney, has argued before the Supreme Court. I shared last night, one of the problems that we run into with activist judges is when Congress does not do its job up front. What they do is they pass legislation that, quite frankly, is not constitutional, pass it off to the judges to determine what part is constitutional and what part is not, and then we get mad because they're activist judges. We need to make sure that we do what's right there. But from a legislative position is that we need to make sure that the freedoms that we have protected under the Constitution are there. Repealing Obamacare is a big deal to me. You know, when we allow the individual mandate to stand up, what we're doing is exacerbating and it's spreading out that federal control that, quite frankly, there was nothing sacred after Obamacare. They will be able, under the Commerce Clause, to do anything they want to do. You talk about state rights, they are ended. And so what we need to do is make sure we repeal it. Even if the Supreme Court comes back and says what we're going to do is it's unconstitutional, because if Obama gets back in, there are 4 Supreme Court justices that are ready to retire. He appoints 2 liberals. Then the next thing you know, there's another court case that comes through, works up through the appellate level, goes back before the Supreme Court, and all of a sudden we have Obamacare, a national care, back instead just because of that. So we need to make sure that the person you send is committed to repealing it, and I'm committed to doing that.
Would you repeat that again?
Sure. Through your association with Independence Caucus, you've indicated your commitment to constitutionally limited government. What are your legislative priorities in this regard?
Well, yeah, the first one that pops into your head is Obamacare. Obamacare is a violation of the 5th, 9th, and 10th Amendments, and hopefully it will be repealed on that basis. That is not enough. You need to dig down, dig it out of our medical system, and make sure it is no part of it. It is taking away the rights of the people, free choice. It's unfunded mandates, and that is the number one that pops into my head. The other one, another one would be like Sarbanes-Oxley. Is everybody familiar with Sarbanes-Oxley? What that did? It made all corporate owners, primarily the ones in charge of corporations, responsible for the numbers that are put out. And if they're wrong, this came from Enron and Tyco and WorldCom, and when those things went bankrupt, they passed legislation to go after them. This is something that you're getting the government into the business community, and the effect of that was that prior to that time there were like 250 IPOs a year on the New York Stock Exchange, and when that happened, that dropped to around 8 a year. And where did they go? They didn't go to Europe. They didn't go to Japan. They didn't go to these other places because they all did something similar to Sarbanes-Oxley. They went to Hong Kong. And that's where the corporations are going now, to Hong Kong, where they don't have the oppressive government that we've got here on corporations. Now, what do we do about the people that are, offending, and the ones at Tyco and places like that? You put them in jail. You get them out of the system and you put them in jail for doing what they did wrong. But you don't penalize the whole industry. Just as a follow-up on that, if we were to use Sarbanes-Oxley, I would like to put the government on Sarbanes-Oxley for putting out the numbers that they put out. Every month they revise them. You can't trust them. Business community is trying to make plans. And when they revise the numbers like that, those are the ones that ought to go to jail.
Last night, you both indicated that you spent large sums of money, either directly from your assets or based on your, as a result of your asset bases. And with Washington, D.C. flush with special interest money, how do you both plan to insulate yourself from the influences that come from that money?
My campaign has never been about money because my life is not about money. I've always had enough supply, to meet my needs going through life. And we went through some really tough times. I could tell you about the Nixon-Ford Carter era where we lost our house, lost our business, and still owed the government $50,000. We've been through it. We know what it's like. My campaign, I approached it as I've approached starting my businesses, not going out looking for somebody else's money to put into my venture. This is not entrepreneurship where other people invest in you. They're teaching entrepreneurship in schools now. How do you teach somebody to push their house out onto the table? I don't understand that. The that I started came from Mary Jo's and my funding, either from our house or from the business that was started before that. And that is the approach we took towards funding our campaign. I wanted it to be a business approach, not a political approach. They say 40% of a political campaign is out fundraising. I knew I wasn't going to have time to do that, to make it through the primary. So I decided to self-fund. We borrowed on our house to finance this campaign. We made a plan. We knew there was going to be a runoff. We positioned ourselves. We spent less than half what the other campaign did. And we ended up in the runoff, which is exactly what we wanted to do. I believe the other campaign looked and saw some numbers and decided to go for it. And they dumped the money in at the end, and they ended up in the same place I'm in the runoff, which means that was a bad business decision. So as far as insulating myself from other people's money, I have no intention of being indebted to anybody. Now, if they want to back me, that's one thing, but they're not going to buy me. The only person I work for is going to be you when I'm up in Washington.
I think it gets back to accountability, what we talked about earlier. I mean, as you say, there's so much special interest money that's going to be coming in. And I think the key is, and we've already had people approach us, quite frankly, that we've had to say, no, we don't want your money. Now, it's tough when I'm sitting there writing a check and financing it to say that, but that's really where we've got to get with it. there are a number of people who will throw money in terms of buying votes, and I think that's the thing that's so distasteful to us as Americans, is that we've seen the fact that votes normally follow the money. And so in doing that, it's having that same accountability. That 85 group that we had, that I mentioned earlier, in terms of staying connected, that's an accountability group. And what happens is when you're sitting there, nothing is secret. You've got to file, who you get money from, and anything $250 or more, you have to report that. You should report more than that. But at that point, it's not a secret. So from an accountability standpoint, that's where we need to be, and make sure that you take money, from these special interest PACs that are up there. Make sure that your vote lines up with it. We got a PAC check of $5,000, and I shared the other night that's from the Family Research Council Action PAC that endorsed us. And somebody says, well, gosh, if they gave you $5,000, one, you got to assume that your vote could be bought for $5,000, but on the other part of that, let's assume that it could. My voting record will be 100% aligned with the Family Research Council PAC. I don't have to worry about the fact that they're buying my vote, because if you want to know where I stand, you can look, and it's 100%. I plan to be 100% voter with them. There are some other things, being pro-Israel. You don't have to worry about where I am. I'll be pro-Israel. When you start to look at those issues, you've got to stay true to your convictions and make sure that you're there. Accountability is the big part of it.
Thank you. Name your top 2 preferences in terms of congressional committee appointments, and tell us why those choices.
Mine would be Energy and Commerce would be one, and then the Subcommittee on Appropriations for Interior. Those 2, I believe, have the greatest impact in terms of where we are. If outside of that, perhaps adding a Veterans Affairs Committee. There's a real heart. I've talked to Jeff Miller here. I mean, we've got an unbelievable retired military group in Western North Carolina. So those 3 would be the areas that I'd have the most interest in. The first 2, really, it comes down to regulation. I think that regulation has gone amok from a standpoint of what we've allowed, both in terms of environmental regulation and administrative regulation, to really hamstring our energy policy. We're paying for it at $3.50 a gallon, and if the fact that we haven't had a nuclear power plant built since the mid-1980s, the reason for that is regulation. When you start looking at the industries that we have, we have gotten ridiculous with the amount of regulation that's out there. And so those 2 committees, I believe, would have the greatest impact on reining that in. The Energy Commerce Committee, where I think we've taken the Commerce Clause and gone way beyond expanding the federal power. The Interior Appropriations Committee, because ultimately how you get to these guys, they won't listen to Congress, they won't listen even to the executive branch, but they will listen when you cut their funding. And so in doing that, that would be my motive on being there, wield that power of influence. And so I would see those as being a primary concern. I think that our real threat right now is an energy threat, that we have to go on a path of self-sufficiency, and if we don't, we're going to end up as a third world country when economically it comes crashing down. We need to do something. We've been trying to do it for 35 years. It's time to start doing so.
A while back, I was asked, what committees I'd like to be on and everything, and the obvious one that pops up is the Small Business Committee. But then I did some research and found that there are like 21 different committees that are up there, and 106 subcommittees. Now, freshman congressmen, when they go up there, you're not going to get to sit on Ways and Means or Appropriations or those big name committees. You're going to have to look at the subcommittees that are underneath them. And so I did that and picked out a number of those. Can't limit it to just 2, because there are some really good ones that I could serve on. On the Small Business Committee, you get into agriculture, energy, and trade. You get into investigations and oversight, and of course economic growth, taxes, and capital access. Another committee was financial services that I looked at. And one of the reasons I like this, because there was a subcommittee called Domestic Monetary Policy and Technology. It's headed up by Ron Paul. I really believe he's got the right idea on a lot of economic issues, and I would like to work with him on that. The idea, or the area of Veterans Affairs, subcommittee on that, economic opportunity. This is an area that I'm very good at, providing opportunity for people to excel in their professions, in their passions. And too many of our veterans are coming back, and they don't just want help. They want to be able to transition back into society and be productive. They don't want just somebody to give them things from then on. And this is an area on economic development that I think I would be really good at to help them get transition back in. And then you get down to oversight and reform. And the reason I picked this one, there's one called National Security, Homeland Defense, and Foreign Operations. I've done business around the world, very familiar with different cultures in China, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Russia, Mexico, Brazil, all over the world. And this is the one that Jason Chavez chairs. And I would really like to work with him since he's one of the original Tea Party congressmen up there.
Of the various budget proposals floating around DC these days, which one do you prefer and why?
The one that cuts taxes, reduces regulations, that gets government out of our lives. You know, yeah. I wish there was. That was that simple. Budget proposals. You know, what's been put out there? Ryan's budget proposal. He increases spending still $1.5 billion a year over the next 10 years. It's less than what the Democrats are putting out there, but it's still too much. It does talk about balancing the budget by 2017, but that does not start cutting into the deficit. They're just not aggressive enough on doing this. In business, when you want to stop the bleeding and balance a budget, I've got experience in doing this. You have to consolidate, then you cut, and then you control. We have got way too much government up there. There are too many people. Too many of them are looking for things to do, and they're just spending money. We need to cut our government from 14 cabinets back down to 11. Getting rid of the Department of Energy, getting rid of the Department of Education and getting that responsibility back to the states, getting rid of the EPA and moving it into the Department of Interior, and moving Homeland Security, I've already said this, back to Defense and Justice, and getting rid of all the czars and moving those responsibilities back under the departments. Once you get this done, then you cut the personnel by 30%, and what you're left with are people who are great at with their jobs, and they refine the processes. And that's where the savings takes place. This is what we do in business. I'm not in favor of any of the plans that are up there right now because nobody knows how to put together a good business plan to stop the bleeding and balance the budget, and it needs to be done now. We are mortgaging our children's future, and it's got to stop. You need new people up there with new ideas and not the same old establishment policies.
Judy, to answer your question specifically, I think what it would be for me is probably the Heritage Foundation came out with a pretty aggressive budget, and I say by aggressive, you know, it's a 10-year plan. You know, as we look at that, one of the things that we've got, you know, when you look at everybody, anytime you come up with a plan, they say, oh gosh, that's draconian. You can't make those kind of cuts. And we've been saying that. The problem with some of the budgets that are out there right now is that they make cuts 8 and 9 years later. And so what happens is that you get a Congress that comes up and says, oh yeah, we're signing on to that. But today's Congress cannot make decisions for future Congresses. You know, and so what we have to understand is if we're going to do it, we need to do it now and make sure that we put it in place now and make real cuts, substantial cuts that, quite frankly, when we do, may send me home. Because, you know, when you make those cuts, everybody, or how many of you are in favor of cutting? Okay. How many of you are definitely in favor of it if it's cutting your budget? Everybody's in favor of cutting when it's cutting somebody else, but we're all going to have to sacrifice in this because ultimately it is our nation that is at stake. And so in doing that, the concern I have about some of the budgets are that we make promises now, we increase income, and we make cuts later. Ronald Reagan, that happened to him. He actually went from a $1 trillion deficit to a $3 trillion deficit because he was promised cuts, and he was also promised tax increases. Well, we got the tax increases. We never got the cuts. And so in doing that, Albert Einstein says, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And so we need to make sure that we don't do the same thing over and over again. And so in doing that specifically is one that really gets our fiscal house in order in a very short period of time.
Let me build a little bit on Judy's question with a follow-up question, and that has to do with the I-Caucus commitment you both made with regard to fiscal responsibility. What would be your legislative priorities with regard to the fiscal responsibility of our government?
I'm up. One, it's been mentioned tonight that I was not in favor of saying that we would not increase the debt ceiling, and we shouldn't increase the debt ceiling. So let me go on record once and for all that we shouldn't be increasing the debt ceiling and going down, and so in doing that. But in terms of a legislative priority, I think where we have to go with that is a couple of different things. We have to look at true Medicare and Medicaid reform. All the cuts that Vance was talking about earlier were wonderful. We could cut out our entire military. We could cut out most of, all of the administration, and we're still not going to balance our budget. And so when we really look at that, we're going to have to make sure that we preserve the benefits for those that are either on Medicare or about to go on Medicare, but we're going to have to modify that to make sure that we can preserve it for the seniors that are getting it now, because if we don't, it's going to go bankrupt. That's one of the problems with Obamacare. We need to make sure that we take the argument to them. We pass Obamacare, and it's a $500 billion suck out of Medicare. So we need to be telling the seniors, everybody's for Obamacare. You need to understand that what's happening is ultimately you're going to be paying for that. So let me tell you how you're going to be paying for that. Right now your premiums are about $94 a month. Well, those premiums will go to $104 next year. $104 next year, because it's an election year. We wouldn't want to get it up too quickly. But by the year 2014, it's up in the $240 a month range. So we see a 2.5 times increase in the premiums for Medicare. And why are we doing that? Because we passed a piece of legislation that shouldn't have been passed in the first run. So those two things I think would be my legislative priorities, and to make sure that we preserve what the seniors have now. My mom's on Medicare, and I would hear about it if I cut it, I can promise you. But in doing that, we need to make sure that we preserve it for the future.
Would you repeat that again?
Leveraging the commitment that you made through Independence Caucus in the direction of fiscal responsibility. What are your legislative priorities with regard to fiscal responsibility?
All right. Talking about the debt, I don't know whether you heard it. I will vote no on raising the debt limit. Mark said we should not raise the debt limit. Now, there is a difference between what we're saying. I agree we should not, and I will vote no. The reason I say that is because the debt scares me more than anything else going on in this country right now. As a father of four and a small business owner, I at one time was a financial analyst, so I ran the numbers based on what they're saying in Washington right now, and how the deficits are still growing. We're at $16 trillion, or soon will be, with the next two raises of the debt ceiling that are already programmed. If that debt gets up to $25 trillion, And that'll happen in the next 5 to 7 years at the growth rate. The interest alone on that will be $625 billion a year. That is almost what we spend to defend our country. And if our credit rating continues to drop to that of Spain, Italy, some of the others over there, that interest alone will be over $1 trillion a year, and we only took in $2.3 trillion in revenue last year. That is the economic demise of America as we know it. Everything will change when we default on that debt. And that's why I say we do not increase the debt limit now. If there is to be a crisis, let it be now, before the debt's too large and the time gets too late. Our generation, I'm not sorry, our generation, we are the boomers. And I tell people, never bet against a boomer. We have been through it. We went through it with the Nixon, Ford, Carter era, the dot-com bubble, the housing bubble, and we're still here, and we're okay. It's the other generations that I'm worried about. That's why we've got to step up and do something about that debt now. Now, the other piece of legislation would be balancing the budget. As you can tell, I'm a financial guy. I see the need to do this. So we quit kicking it down the road for the rest of for our future generations to handle. They're going to look back on us and say, what were you thinking to leave us such a mess after your parents left you such a wonderful America? I worry every day that we're losing the America our parents left us.
Okay, you kind of addressed this in your opening statements, but you both announced plans that promote job growth. Tell us why you believe your approach is better than your opponent's.
Thank you for asking. I handed out a jobs plan, put it in front of everybody because I've been addressed on this before with some things that just aren't right. I put out my jobs plan first back in September of 2011, September 21st. I signed it and put it out. The one you've got now is a revised edition, and that's what we do in business. We revise, upgrade. My jobs plan, first of all, states that we do need fiscal responsibility in Washington. That is the macroeconomic approach. Balance the budget, reasonable taxes, government spending under control, reduce the size of government, and watch out for government regulations. Get them out of our lives. That is what we need as a firm foundation on which to grow an economy. But the jobs are produced out where we work. I know. I've started companies and created jobs. I've got over 300 jobs to my credit right now with the companies I started. Typically, traditionally, and what happens in Washington is they set up this plan, and this is what happened during the Reagan years. They set up the plan and then they waited. Do you know it was 5 years under Reagan before unemployment dropped below 7%? I'm not good at waiting. I don't want to wait 5 years here in Western North Carolina. I'm one of the guys who steps up, confronts a problem, and solves it, and goes out and gets those jobs. I have experience working around the world. I've negotiated and done business all around the world, in Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, Brazil. I know what other business owners are looking for. It is not just tax breaks. Now, Mark says that nobody's going to move here just because it's a beautiful place. Read my plan. It is not just because it's a beautiful place. We have a culture here, a work ethic. We have resources. We have an attitude that people want to be here. Security. I've gone around and talked to all 17 county managers to find out what kind of jobs people want here. This is getting in the field and getting it done. People say to me, why hasn't this been done before? And I say, because nobody on my level took the steps to do it. Nobody knew how to do it. Because you're not used to having people on my caliber to step up and want to get involved in government and save this country. Now is your chance to put somebody like me in Washington, who will work in the field to bring those companies here from across the country and around the world, to restore our economy.
Well, our jobs plan is a macro plan that really does what has worked throughout history. It worked in the 1920s. We have the Roaring 20s. We saw the result of that. It worked under Ronald Reagan, and yes, when he cut regulation by half, when he literally took on the unions, when he reduced regulation, we saw that what happened was what they call the Great Modernization. And in doing that, we saw unbelievable prosperity happen for a number of years. But specifically, to answer the question, why is it better than what we have? Vance says, why isn't anybody doing it? Well, we are doing it. We're doing it on a state and federal level. We're spending $1.2 billion on a federal level to promote commerce. Now, to think that what we could do is to come up with a plan who says, all right, well, I'm going to go to Congress, and I'm going to convince the majority of the congressmen to pass an earmark to come up with a federally funded program to promote jobs in Western North Carolina. When they're representing their district, wanting to promote jobs there, it's just not going to happen. Businesses make decisions based on economic reasons. South Carolina right now is looking to eliminate their corporate tax. And so what happens is when they eliminate their corporate tax, that puts North Carolina at a disadvantage. So I can tell you what's going to happen is businesses are going to go there. They will build their businesses here and retire here in Western North Carolina. That's what we've seen. They will move here, but they don't make financial decisions based on non-economic reasons. He's a businessman, I'm a businessman, and you go where economically it makes the most sense. We also, when you start to look at it, he announced his plan on the 17th of the month. On the 18th of the month, Obama in the Washington Post comes out and says what he's going to do is he's going to come up with another plan of $1 billion to promote manufacturing in this country. And the Brookings Institute looked at it and says, yes, manufacturing is growing. Where is it growing? In the cities. And what we're seeing is that it's only grown by about 3% from the year 2010. And so what I see is a plan that creates a federal funding new plan, of which, as iCaucus endorsed people, we're against. But yet what we're saying is here we are, this is going to work. We have it on a state level, it doesn't work. We have it on a federal level now, and I don't see how it puts us at a competitive advantage.
Can we have follow-up on this? I mean, just a little more time on it.
Let's give them 2 minutes.
There is no earmark in my plan. I don't know where that came from. There's nothing in there. The only one to talk about federal funding was Mark, and I don't know why he's talking about that. He's talked a lot about my plan, and that's why I put it out. So you can read for yourself what's involved. It's very simple. What he hasn't put out is his plan. There is nothing in writing. One of the reasons it's not is because he talks about 20% reduction in regulations. Now, as a businessman, and everybody here in the room, use common sense. How do you reduce regulations by 20%? I know what he's referring to. There was a study done where it said if you cut out regulators, for every regulator you drop out, you get 98 jobs in the employment in the workforce. If you cut 20% of the regulators, they're saying that you get 4.5 million new jobs. And that's in this study. That does not make sense. I do not follow my regulations because I got a regulator coming into my business. I will not reduce the enforcement of those regulations because I'm not worried about getting caught. I enforce those regulations because it's the law. Under this assumption, if the IRS dropped its IRS agents by 20%, would our taxes drop by 20%? No, that is the same logic. So I have no idea where they get this 20% reduction in regulations and we get 4.5 million new jobs and 34,000 of them come here to Western North Carolina. We only need 17,000 jobs here to get full employment. So, I ran the numbers on this. Nobody else has. And it doesn't make sense. My jobs plan is one that goes out, gets companies like mine, less than 100 employees. We don't go just because of the economic environment. We go because of the quality of life, to raise our families. And that's what I'll use to bring people here, the kind of companies like I've run.
Well, our plan has been out there, and it's got individual sources. If you want to Google it, you Google 2020 plan. It's been out there. It's actually on our website. It's been there on a regular basis, and so the fact that he was able to quote 34,000 jobs means at least he got the press release, because that's what we have, and that's what we've been sharing on a regular basis. But as we look at this, when we talk about it, it's not cutting regulators, it's cutting regulation. And there's a huge difference, because regulation strangles there is not anything that we can do on a daily basis that doesn't get regulated. I'll give you a prime example. How many of you know that you may have a wetlands in your backyard? All right? There's a glancing goose. Have you ever heard of glancing goose test? Well, there's a glancing goose test that if a goose goes and flies over and can see its reflection in your backyard one day a year, you probably have a wetlands in your backyard. Now, that's the kind of ridiculous regulations that are out there. And you can Google that one too. All right, and so what I'm sharing with you is that our plan from a macro standpoint is what we need. The private sector doesn't need any help. It hasn't in the past, and quite frankly, as conservatives, that's where we are with it. As we start to look at this, when you really start to look about creating jobs, what I want you to do is get out of my way. I've never asked for stimulus. I've never asked for a loan. What I want you to do is get out of my way and not come in and make me post things that I don't need to post, and make me have compliance. Because when I talked to Mr. Broyhill about sending jobs to China, it wasn't about cheap labor. He said labor represented 23 cents of the dollar. He said the real reason why jobs went to China was regulations, and the fact that we had to comply with those regulations sent jobs, manufacturing jobs there, and so cutting those will make a real difference.
That's what John Stossel said.
Carl, do you think we should take a break? No, you were doing what I was doing, right?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, all right. So why don't we do this? Thank you both very much. Why don't we take an 8-minute station break? Right? Let's get back here. We'll time it. And if you have a question that you'd like to be asked and you want, but maybe a few minutes before that. So we want to take whatever time your questions demand of these gentlemen, especially if there's something we haven't anticipated tonight in our questions. And then I think we've just a couple more things that we'll want to do. What I think we'll do is we'll alternate between a microphone and a question on a card, and we'll read the cards from up here. Okay, so. Yeah, can we go with 2-minute answers this from here on out, and then 2
If they're
minutes
really
from-
hard questions, we can go with 30-second answers.
Okay. All right, I'm going to hand it. Nancy, are you ready to go? All right, let's start with Nancy, and then we'll go from there.
My mic on?
This
Yeah,
way.
it's on.
You guys have this?
Can you all hear me? Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Vance, in your jobs plan, step 3, you say that I've traveled all over the world, I know what other business owners are looking for, and it isn't tax breaks. I respectfully disagree. Linamar, the manufacturer that moved into the old Volvo plant on Hendersonville Road, is a perfect example of being all about tax breaks. Thanks to our commissioners being so generous with our wallets, we taxpayers have provided sweetheart loans to this manufacturer to cover their upfront costs to get up and running. So these new jobs to our community come at a very hefty price tag. Please explain to me what you mean as to how business owners want something other than tax breaks.
Thank you for asking. Too often people assume that we've got to give up our tax base to get people to move here. And that's just not the case. I mean, if the taxes are too high, obviously we're going to run people off. I would never operate in California. The taxes are too high, and a lot of people are leaving there. But my reason for being here, living in North Carolina, is not because of anything to do with taxes. There are so many other things that business owners are looking for besides just tax breaks. And you talk to people that live here in our communities. They came here for the quality of life, and I would venture to say I know what these other owners are looking for in other parts of the country, in the world. They've got problems that we can't imagine. And I'm not just talking about people in California and places like that. I'm talking about other parts of the world that are looking to have a place, to raise their family. To me, the most important thing in life is not taxes. It's my family. And that's why I picked North Carolina to move my family to 18 years ago. I didn't come up here, just because of the beauty. I was looking for a smaller community and a culture of life that was better to raise my family in. It's like saying everybody works for their job for the money. Money is way down on the list of importance in a job. You've got to have enough that you can support your family. But the being employed in something that you have a passion for, working with the other people in your job, these are other things that people look at a job for. Okay, go ahead.
I agree with that quality of life, but why are we not getting more companies coming to our area? Why is your company in South Carolina and not North Carolina?
Two very good questions. I'll answer the second one first. I started my company back in 1989 with my father. And by 94, it was doing well enough that my wife and I decided to look for a better place to raise our family, a smaller community, and we picked out Burke County. That was 18 years ago. And I told my employees that if it worked out, I wouldn't move the company to North Carolina because I didn't think it was fair to them, just because we wanted to live here, to tell them that their jobs had moved to North Carolina. Call that employee loyalty, because they helped me start the company. And it worked out, and for the last 18 years I've been driving back and forth, and it has worked out very well. On the second, on the first question, why hasn't this worked before? Because nobody has done it from a congressional standpoint. There is some clout to what I do, and in having a congressional position. Yes, there are a lot of regional and local economic developers, but they're not coordinated. And nobody has taken it to the level that I'll take it to go overseas. Now, in my plan, it says I will work with government programs. There are some in place that I'm not talking about bringing those into our district, but I worked with a Gold Key program to go up and set up distributors over in Europe. And it was very easy for me to go over there and find the distributors. There are other programs that will come this way and bring other companies from around the world to areas where we're pursuing them.
Why isn't our Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development organizations already doing that, what you're talking about?
They're trying
That's
to,
their function.
but it's not just one county. You can't just have Burke County go over and say, we got a great place, you need to come live here. It's a coordinated effort for our whole district. Some areas don't want smokestack manufacturing. They want agriculture, they want research, they want retirement communities, they want second homes. And it's a coordinated effort between, maybe we put the factory in Henderson County, but the retirement homes are over in Jackson County. It's that kind of thing that needs to be put together and coordinated on a national basis. And that's something I see that can be done. And I see it as a no-brainer. It would be very easy for somebody like me to do that.
Can I respond to that? This is the difference that I see, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing is that a federal mandate of creating jobs in Western North Carolina is what you're proposing because of
What in the world?
because
How do you say that, what I just
well
said?
because you're saying that because from a congressional standpoint you'll have power to do that, but so that's not what you're saying.
No.
Okay. Well, let me go on because I'm on a Western Economic Development Board that includes all the counties that are in our district. I serve on that board. The biggest impediment we have in North Carolina is competition from other states who have better taxes, less regulation, and when you start to see it, we don't have to look too far. BMW is in Greenville. Michelin is in Greenville. You start looking over on Kia is out on I-20. You start looking at all these manufacturing plants, and the reasons why they go there are economic. To make the assumption that we're going to put jobs in Western North Carolina because somebody wants to live there is the same assumption to say that the reason why we're putting jobs in China is because we want to live there. It doesn't follow. The logic does not follow. You go where there's economic incentive to do that, and that's what a private entrepreneur always does. Now, do we try to find jobs in Western North Carolina? Can we do things? Yes. On a state, local, and federal level when we get rid of it, but we've got to get our economy going again. And then what happens is on a state and local level, just like you had mentioned, there becomes incentives on why they would locate here. Sometimes it's infrastructure and roads. And we see businesses happening in Henderson and Buncombe County that are feeder businesses to bigger businesses in Greenville, South Carolina. And so what we've got to understand that is we make economic decisions.
I have a question here from a card. What should be done about states that are going bankrupt? Should the federal government bail them out?
Absolutely not. We've got to get back to a position of self-reliance, and it starts personally. Personally, then the community, and then the state. To bail somebody out is not demonstrating what this country was founded on. I've been to the point where I lost my business, lost my house, owed money and everything. I did not take bankruptcy. It wasn't even a consideration. I didn't go to the government. Where did I go? I went to family, for family support. And that's, you can call that a resource, a very personal resource. And I got going again. Not with a loan of money or anything like that, just the family support. And no, I didn't move back home. This country needs to reestablish the culture of self-reliance. When we were growing up, could we have ever imagined borrowing money from a communist country? What in the world? Or that our economy would be dependent on the oil coming out of the Middle East. This is where we get into the energy policy. If we need to mine our own coal, tap our natural gas, drill our oil, build safe nuclear power, and demonstrate to the world that we are self-reliant. We are America. And when you're self-reliant, you can determine your own future. We are the center of the global economy and the center of world freedom, and we need to demonstrate that. So no, we should not be bailing out states. They dug that hole. They need to figure out how to get out of it. And when they do, they'll be stronger for it. I know I was when I got out of the hole that I was in economically. So the answer is no.
Yeah, we agree on this. The answer is no. And really, it's not about bailing out the states, because most of it is in the form of bonds and borrowed money and other things. And so actually you end up bailing out investors. We got under the premise that some banks were too big to fail, and so we bailed them out. And what we've essentially done is created a bigger mess than we have. We own GM now because they were too big to fail. And in doing that, we tinker with the free market, and when we tinker with the free market, as I said earlier, it ends in disastrous results. And so as we look at that, one of the things that I think that we've got to make sure of is that when we look at bailouts, that's exactly what they are. They're taking your money and giving it to someone else who's managed their money poorly. And bottom line is that we're rewarding bad behavior. If we always bail them out, then I can tell you what I'm going to do is, if you're promising to bail me out, I'm going to take as many risks as I possibly can, because eventually you're going to bail me out. And so the only thing that keeps that risk in check is the fear of failure and the fact that it will come back on you personally. And so that's where you have to do. You have to have that personal responsibility.
There's a constitutional requirement for the president to be a natural-born citizen. There's a number of surveys, evidence that has been presented that question that. The president is also the commander-in-chief of the United States military. The people that are there that guarantees all your freedoms, not the president. It's those people out on the line that does that. As a military man, you have no requirement to obey an illegal order. If the president is not a natural-born citizen, then he does not control the military. And so the question I have, if you're sent to Congress, will you pursue some kind of investigation to find out whether or not this guy is really a citizen and entitled to those authorities?
Well, I believe that should be done now and not wait till I get to Congress. I believe when I get to Congress that we won't have to worry about Mitt Romney, whether he's a natural born citizen or not. Yeah, I mean, I know you're concerned. I'm concerned too. I hate the thought that we're being led by somebody who is not an American. And there's something there that's not right. Yes, he's produced a birth certificate, but it's not the one that I've got and that most of us here in the room have as far as proving our origin. I don't know where he's from. Chicago, which bothers me enough just in itself. I hate that it's a distraction. It should not be. We've got so many problems in this country right now that this should not be one of our considerations, whether our president was born here. You know, shame on those who voted for him and didn't question something like this before it happened. The leadership is the biggest concern right now that I have. Lack of leadership in Washington, not just the president, but in both parties. This country is drifting. And as a businessman, it's what's causing our economic problems right now. The worst answer you can give a businessman is a maybe. If you tell me yes, I'm on my way. If you tell me no, I'll go a different direction. If you tell me maybe, I'm frozen. I don't know what to do. And we've had nothing but a maybe from Washington for 3.5 years now. So I appreciate your concern on this. You are right, but I don't think it's going to be a problem within the next 6 months to 8 months. Thank you for asking.
Yes. You know, I see it as if we do our job from a grassroots standpoint, we won't have to worry about it. You know what? We'll send him back home to Kenya or wherever it is. You know, we'll send him back home, and so in doing that, I believe that what we will find is that we will get a new commander-in-chief who will hopefully honor the Constitution, respect our military, and quit cutting it. You know, I find it just amazing that one day what's going to happen is we're going to have an invasion or a terrorist attack or whatever, and we're not going to be able to defend ourselves because it's going to be too late. Because we've cut 100,000 troops. We've gone from 600 ships to 285. We've gotten rid of technology from an Air Force standpoint that quite frankly allows the Chinese to beat us. You know, and enough is enough. You know, we need to know that what we have to do, we have defended our country well. And it's time that we, even in a time of peace, make sure that we're prepared to do it once again. Because if we wait until the attack to get prepared, it'll be too late. And so, you know, shame on him. You know, it's amazing. I've gone across these 17 counties. I find so few people that have voted for Obama. There are not many people who are willing to admit it anymore. You know, I had the head of the Democratic Party in Madison County wanting a picture with me because she says he's going down. You know, it's...
We hope.
But what's going to happen the second go around? Even if he goes down this time, he can come back again.
I think we've had our fill of hope and change.
And those of us that moved down here from Chicago couldn't agree with you more. So I appreciate that endorsement. All right, here's another question. This person claims that they didn't vote for either of you during the primary.
Shame on you.
So here's the question.
Now's your chance.
How can I be certain, I'm not asking a question, I'm just reading it off the card. How can I be certain you will vote against party leadership when necessary?
Oh, wow.
It goes to the reason why I'm running for Congress. And you ask my wife, and she'll tell you, I'm running for the right reasons. to save America for our future generations. I would not be stepping up if I wasn't concerned, if I didn't think it was going away. I mean, I've worked my whole life for my family, and everybody that works at my company, they are there to support their families. I work hard, I do my job, and I go home to my family. And that's what I intend on doing in Washington. I am not up there to start a new career, to get power. I cannot be impressed by anything in Washington other than where I am and the history that's taken place there. I have seen so much around the world as I've done business. I will not be impressed by the people that are up there. I've talked to them and often wondered if that was all there was. There are some great people up there, but there are some who have no business leading this country. And frankly, I'll probably be older than most of them that are going to come into my office. And they'll come in and say, the leader wants you to do this. And I'll look at them and say, why would I do that? I don't work for them. I work for my family, and I'll work for your families. And I want to work, do my job, and then come home and live here in Western North Carolina. I'm not there to make friends, and I'm not there to impress anybody, just to get the job done. So yes, you can trust me to say no to the leader if it's wrong.
Really, we look at accountability, and we look at really the fact that we don't really need the job. I'm not running for this job. It has not been a lifelong dream. It's been out of a concern for our country, and quite frankly, we're going down to a point where if principled people do not go up there and make principled decisions, you know, we're seeing the end of our country. Now, I got 3 people in the back, my wife and my 2 children. They're the first people that I would have to answer to, that if I went along with something, you know, they're shaking their head, yes. And so we've done things differently all our life. You know, I'm a homeschool dad. My children, we homeschooled them the whole way. And that was hard because we were in a small community where we knew the teachers, good teachers. I mean, and truly here we were making a decision to homeschool them in spite of the fact that, you know, some people said, well, gosh, you don't trust us to teach your children? It wasn't a matter of trust. It was making a different principled choice for our children. But yet here's the other part of that. Getting with like-minded people that are already up there, that are willing to go against the party system. I've probably had more than a dozen conversations with Jeff Duncan. You know what the speaker calls him? Hard-headed. You know, I think that is a badge of honor. You know, and so when he is looked at hard-headed, so what I've asked him to do is to help mentor me as we go through the situation. He says we need 25 more hard-headed folks. I plan to be one of them, and with your help, whoever you are that didn't vote for me, you know, I would be honored to have your vote. And I can assure you, it was my wife. No, I could assure you that from my standpoint, that when the rubber meets the road, I will make the principled decisions because we have done that from day one, from the time my children were in my arms until now.
Do we have another live question?
Am I in?
Okay.
All right, we've had a lot of problems following the Constitution up in Washington. And Article 1, Section 8 provides 17 measly things that the government is allowed to have power over us on. Everything else is left to the states and the individuals. And we are so far away from that right now. I'm wondering if you guys have any ideas how we're ever going to get back to it, and what steps you might take to get there.
Article 1, Section 8 is the part of the Constitution that government is using against us to attack our Bill of Rights. The first clause is the General Welfare Clause. It's mentioned twice in the Constitution, once in the preamble and again later in the Constitution. The Commerce Clause is number 3, and everybody knows how that is being abused to take away our rights. You know, what they do in California, you know, if it affects us here, then it's a federal affair based on the Commerce Clause. And the one that really catches everything is the 18th clause, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18. That's known as the basket clause, because it's the one that they use that says, whatever we need to do to support what's up above in the Constitution, the government has the right to do. And it's the needs clause. And that's the one that really, it's the one that was used to set up the Federal Reserve, the first central bank. Hamilton used it to really embarrass Madison in setting that up. So, those are the three clauses that are really being abused and taking away our rights in from our Bill of Rights. We need to stand up and make sure and strengthen those Bill of Rights and identify and explain Article 1, Section 8 and each of the clauses and what they mean and make it known. People need to know the history of why these clauses were written to understand the purpose of them, and so they're not abused. We need to make sure the government stops taking away our Bill of Rights.
George, I think you're referring to those enumerated powers, and so I was looking real quickly to see if it's 17 or 30, because I've been in two different debates and there's different numbers, and so there are more than one in some of the 17, and so but those enumerated powers, as we look at those, are specifically set out for us to do that. Now, how have we gone beyond that? I see the biggest detriment to that has been the Commerce Clause. We see that over and over and over again. The Commerce Clause is used time and time again. It's used with Obamacare. That's how they're putting it in. What we see is they see that somehow that everything that we do has a significant effect on commerce. Now, there's been Supreme Court cases that have come down that have defined it, but normally it's in an expansive mode when it's something like drugs or guns. It's in more confining mode at other times. What we need to do is, the biggest thing that we do is make sure that the Supreme Court justices that get on there are constitutionally conservative, because that's where, sadly, it's getting decided, is in the courts. Now, how do we as a congressman do something about that? I think what we've got to do is make sure that we don't pass laws that go in the General Welfare Clause. The General Welfare Clause was really used to restrict things, saying that it needed to be for the general welfare, and so how do we get earmarks that are for the general welfare? I guess if it's good for Louisiana, it's good for Western North Carolina. I don't understand that, but what we've done is we've gone down a road that we can't go constitutionally, and unless we start to rein that back through legislation in Congress and through good conservative appointments to the Supreme Court and the appellate court. A lot of things don't ever get heard at the Supreme Court level. It gets done at the appellate court. The Ninth Circus out there, Ninth Circus we need to get rid of. That's out in California. Thanks.
Just a little follow-up, if I have a second. Perhaps writing something in each bill that says that we're not going to worry, that you're not going to be able to use the Commerce Clause to either kill or support this stupid thing. We're not going to do that.
Well, we have to start to define things better very quickly. And for example, I mentioned earlier about wetlands. One of the things that Congress has not done is define what wetlands are all about. We talk about navigable, thank you, Mary Jo, waters. And so as we look at that, and what it's gone is now that any creek or hollow or anything, it is wetlands. And so Congress must define that. And the more that they start to define, what happens is it starts to limit those powers. And so I think that's where we need to go with that. Thank you.
I'm not sure Congress can define the Constitution. That's what the justice does. And so that's where it's important that we have the right justices sitting on the Supreme Court. They're the ones that look at the Constitution and make constitutional law. Not make it, but define it. So, when you talk about going to the Constitution and changing things, that's not an easy thing to do. But it needs to be defined, and we need a court system that does that in the right way. We need to get rid of Obama and make sure that doesn't happen again.
I got one great idea, a novel idea that we've never done. Let's impeach some justices, that become activists. Let's do that. You only have to impeach one or two, and I think the others will get the message.
All right, I counted 2 hands, and I've got a card. So we have to be out of here in 15 minutes. So I want to give us time for the questions. If we could limit our answers to 1.5 minutes.
Jeez.
I can answer the question.
And questions, 30 seconds or less, please. And then I think we can get through this together without too much ado. All right?
The president touts he's got the slowest growth rate in the budget in the last 40 years. The fact is, in year 2, the baseline budget was increased by $1 trillion. How are you going to address it?
I'm a financial analyst, and show me the numbers and I'll tell you what they say. They have taken a 10-year average, and when they started out at whatever point, and that we had a rule or a saying as a financial analyst: you tell me what you want to say, and I'll get you the facts and figures to back it up. I don't do that anymore, but I know how it's done, and that's why I say, you show me the numbers and I'll tell you how they're doing it. It's wrong. It's obviously wrong. Common sense tells us this guy is just rocketing the deficit up. It's never grown this fast. And it is out of control, and I don't care what he says. If I can see the numbers, I can tell you where he's wrong and show you what's really happening. So that is one strength I would have in Congress, that when somebody throws some numbers out there, they better be very careful, because I know what I'm looking at, especially when they start talking percentages. Anytime you hear a percentage, a red flag ought to go up, because you can say anything you want with percentages. I have that experience, and I can see it when somebody else is doing it.
Well, you've hit a defining point there, because you said that the lowest growth rate in terms of the budget. What we do is we talk about savings in terms of what we're saving compared to the growth rate, and yet what you look at from a percentage standpoint, $1 trillion increase on an $11 trillion budget is a smaller growth rate than $1 trillion increase on a $5 trillion budget. And so what happens is the dollar amount can be significant, and yet the rate can be lower. And so, getting back to the numbers game, that's what they're doing. But really what we've got to do is we've got to cut, we're not even back to levels that we had back in 2008, 2009, and what we're seeing is we've added federal jobs, 250,000 federal jobs, 6,000 attorneys have been added under the Obama administration. Now, when you look at that, if that does not send up a red flag, nothing against attorneys if you're in here, but I sure hope that you don't go to work for the government. And in looking at that, 6,000 government attorneys, 23% increase in government attorneys. Why? To try to make sure that they implement the administrative code, the executive orders, the judicial acts that come down on a daily basis. And so what we've got to do is we've got to start making real cuts, and that's why it needs to start. That's why I would support cutting, and not cutting future spending, but cutting real cuts now.
One question here on the card. If cap and trade comes up before Congress again, how would you address this?
I would vote no. I can't believe that we look at that. That's an Achilles heel for Hayden Rogers and Chief Heath Schuler. They voted for cap, tax, and trade. And that's really what it is. As we look at this, it's an environmental agenda, and so I would vote no. It will come back up, and so we just know that the agenda is there, and so you can count on a solid no vote coming from me.
Obviously vote no. Absolutely vote no. What a bogus program. Does anybody remember what cap and trade was about? It's where if you were allowed so much emissions, from whatever you do, and if you didn't hit those emission levels, you got to sell the rest of them to somebody else. on the open market. I mean, this was an Al Gore stunt. And you don't even hear about it anymore. I don't know what happened to those people that bought into this thing. You know, I was thinking about it not long ago. What happened to all those dollars they bought in to buy somebody else's emissions margins? What a joke! And for it to come up again, I don't think it'll come up. Has any chance of coming up again? I don't know how they would even explain it. I guess they'd fish Al Gore out and get him up there and start talking about global warming and emissions and all that stuff. You know, you got to have some congressmen up there that would laugh if that came up again. And if it does, I would be one laughing and voting no and just in their face and say, what are you talking about? Do you have any idea? That's the kind of attitude we need up there.
Vance, this question is for you. The iCaucus affiliate grassroots are concerned with the continued egregious practice of taking special interest money to pass bills that trample upon our liberties, increase our debt, and only benefit the representatives. You own a solar company that has had government contracts to sell solar panels to government entities. Though your company is not taking money directly, your solar company has profited from the lure of government stimulus money in the way of state rebates, federal tax incentives, utility company incentives, establishing a green public image, and helping control global climate change in selling your solar panels. You have taken out private loans and used your money, your house, as collateral to the tune of approximately $450,000, I believe that's right. You have only collected approximately $7,800 in contributions, and you state you want no contributions. You have also stated that you're giving your congressman's salary to charity. The only two ways you can meet your expenses in North Carolina and DC is from your solar fan company, from profits on shares or from personal salary. It also permits you to legally pay back your loans with special interest money.
Who wrote this? I mean, this is really wrong.
Okay, well, hopefully we're looking for your response.
Yeah, but it's more of a statement, and it is wrong. Go
finish.
ahead.
Let me finish. To pay back your loans with special interest money because the loan for your campaign was done privately. This leaves you vulnerable to green special interest groups who will impose regulations on oil and gas companies to pick winners and losers by engaging crony capitalism to promote alternative energy. If incentives are just a way to do things in business, taking government money to lure customers, are you saying you would be willing to do things that are unconstitutional? Because that's just how they do things in Washington. How will you pay off these debts and
Is
maintain?
that a question? What's the
Tell us how you will pay off these debts and maintain our iCaucus goals.
All right. The solar company you're referring to is a company called Solar Shield, evaporative roof cooling. Started back in 1978 by my father, long before there were solar panels. What it is a company, we manufacture a grid of tubing that goes up on the roof of a building, sprays water on the building intermittently, just enough to get the roof damp, and then it shuts off and allows that water to evaporate. And as it evaporates, it keeps the roof from getting hot. That eliminates roughly 50% of the heat that gets into a building. It has nothing to do with solar panels. Now on our website, we have some solar panels. They're solar thermal panels, not PVs, not the photovoltaics. There's no payback on photovoltaics. They're like 18 to 20 years. We do a solar thermal panel, which is a water heater, which preheats water for industry. We do not sell any to the government. We do not have any government contracts on that. Never have. We do not take any government funding on it. In fact, we haven't sold a system yet, but it's out there because we think there's possibly a future for it, because the payback on solar thermal is about 8 years. Payback on Solar Shield, evaporative roof cooling, is 2 years. So that's why we're in the business. What other question did, gosh. All right, that's the solar part that we've got. We do not do wind, we don't do any of the other stuff. Only evaporative roof cooling and solar thermal. And we haven't sold a solar thermal panel yet. Okay, Jane, this was your question. Go ahead.
No, the issue isn't the solar. The issue is the state rebates.
Yeah, I know. This because you
incentives and-
were on this quite a while last night.
If I may, I'm really concerned that we're bumping up against the clock, and I had asked us to be respectful of that. So I'm going to give Vance the time he needs to answer the question, and then we're going to flip it, and so that both of these gentlemen have an opportunity to give us the close that they came prepared to give. And then we need to draw the meeting to a close, all right? So Vance, go ahead.
Well, real quickly, as far as the financing, you can't buy my integrity. I've said that. As far as paying back my house and how I'm going to support my family, my company is doing very well. We turned it around in 2009, and that was the first year we lost money in 17 years, but we turned it around. We made a profit, and I loaned the company $235,000 that year and didn't take a salary for 7 months. And I did that again in 2010, loaded another $135,000 and didn't take a salary for 6 months. And then we turned a profit in 2010. In 2011, we did a nice profit. And this year, we're breaking all records. We had a record April, a record May. Just last week, we did advanced profit sharing, and I gave each of the employees $1,000, cash, check. And I didn't take one. We're going to have a record year, and all I can say is it'll be okay. My wife trusts me, and if she trusts me, then that's good enough for me. It'll be okay.
Closing statements?
Is it mine first?
You're first.
First, I'll be last.
All right, here we go. Congress is starting out on, and has continued to be on, an unbelievable taxing and spending binge. And that taxing and spending binge threatens our very economic future and the American dream that we have come to know and love. If we don't start making hard, principled decisions, the future of our country, the very existence of freedom, that Ronald Reagan said, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for and preserved and protected. We see it, and we see that really the hope right now, we can be very discouraged. But I'm telling you, that's not the fate of America that we have to look at. In 1776, they said that there was no way that a small little upstart colony could take on the largest nation in the world where the sun never set. And yet we did. We created a great, great nation. In 1880, they said that there was a union that would divide our country, and America was gone. And yet a new birth of freedom happened. In 1980, they said the American era was over. The America that we knew was no longer. And yet Ronald Reagan challenged that and said, no, it's not. And Americans stood side by side, and we reclaimed our country. Right now, they're saying that America is over with. And I'm telling you that that's not the case. Groups like this, grassroots groups across this district and across this country, are willing to stand up and fight and take it back. Yes, sometimes as Tea Partiers, you get a bad name. But you know what? We're patriots. And as patriots, what we will do is take back our country for the American dream that that I have enjoyed, but that everyone has an equal opportunity of enjoying just the same. I ask you for your support. I thank you for your attention. I ask for your vote. And if you will get out and make sure that you get on July 17th, if you are for me. If you're for Vance, just go on vacation.
Pretty good joke.
Use it next time. Yeah, use it in the next debate. Yeah.
It's really been great having everybody here tonight. I've enjoyed it. I hope you did hear some differences between Mark and I. Yes, we're both great guys, good family men, strong Christians. I hope you heard some differences, though, because there is a difference. I was at the state convention a week or so ago, and one of the things I heard a couple times was that the coming election is not about popularity, it's not about personality, it's about performance. And that's what I want to give you an idea of what you can expect from me as your representative while I work for you. Number one is full employment in Western North Carolina in the next 4 years. Number two, I will work with those who have gone ahead of me to strengthen their position. Because as a freshman congressman, I know I can't have that much effect in Washington, but I can strengthen those who will no longer be the freshmen, moving into positions of power. I can use my experience, my expertise, and my passion to strengthen their positions in a lot of different areas. And number three, in the tradition of small businessmen everywhere, and businesswomen, we are very strong on giving back to the communities. My wife and I are committed to giving my entire congressional salary to the charities of Western North Carolina, because we don't want to be a burden on Western North Carolina. Well, it is still struggling with a recessed economy. I am challenging the business leaders and businesses in our district to match that fund, and that'll be used for job development and job training. That means my one congressional seat can contribute as much as $700,000 to Western North Carolina for job development and for needs. That is entrepreneurial strategy, applying to the needs of Western North Carolina. That's what you get when you hire somebody like me. This is walking the walk and not just beating the air with words. I'm asking you for your vote. I'm asking you for your support to get me past the politics so I can go to work for your family, for my family, and for our future generations. Thank you for being here tonight.